this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. For those new subscribers, welcome to the channel. Orchid related, obviously. There are occasional deviations, like the one before this one. That was requested. But in the main, it's about my grow room and the conditions I've got, the kit I use, the orchids I grow, and how I grow them. I've always said there's no one way to grow orchids. There are many. They vary in success rates, but nonetheless we do what we can. Again, for newer people, this is a regular feature. I do a chat on Sunday mornings, although by the time I've processed the video and got it loaded, it's often Sunday afternoon, UK time obviously. But for others that's evening, and for others it's still morning, so that's how it goes. And today I'd like to chat about worrying about our orchids. Well, first of all, worrying about them on its own achieves nothing apart from giving you some grief. It's not going to help your orchids, is it? Worrying about them. But when you worry about something, it should trigger thoughts about what you can do to change. Sometimes nothing. But worrying about it isn't going to change anything. So why do I worry about some of my orchids? Well, in the first instance, it could be incredibly rare and almost impossible to replace, and it's not doing very well. So yes, I'd worry about that. Other orchids may have been a personal gift, which you'd like to keep going as a memory of the gift. Yeah, so you might worry about those. But when you've got a collection like this, I ain't got the time or even the patience to worry about all of them, so I worry about a few, and I think about what I can do about them. Yeah? Now, this is a generalized growing environment, and I call it like a central, mainly middle to lower end of intermediate as far as temperature ranges go. I'm lucky because it's an enclosed space. I can keep the humidity somewhere near where I want it, except in heat waves where it drops a little lower than I would like, shall we say. But we do the best we can. But because it's generalized and I've deviated from the types of orchids that I know are going to do well in that environment to some that perhaps I worried whether they'd even grow and live. Yeah? So down the cooler end, and a few up the warmer end. Those up the warmer end don't like my winter. Those down the cooler end don't like my summer. And it's a matter of, if you don't try it, you'll never know. And if you try it and it sort of works, then you can expand perhaps in that area and perhaps try some different types of orchids that grow in similar conditions. I still maintain that for me the hardest ones are the cloud forest dwellers, because I can't keep the humidity that high, you know, and a lot of other orchids would suffer. You know, they'd start getting mold on them and funguses and things because the humidity is far, far higher than what they would like. But for some it would be perfect. I mean, it's recommended for Restrepias 90% plus humidity constantly with up near 100 at night. Well, I can't do that in here. Everything would be dripping wet all the time. So I do the best I can. And I've only got a few. And the few I've got seem to grow okay. So they made it. But I'm going to pick on a few things. First of all, you might get glimpses, although I'm not going to move the camera, of new blooms. Well, I'm not going to point them out today, simply because another regular feature is everything in bloom on the 8th. And just for once, it might be nice to do that video with some new blooms that weren't filmed 2 days, 3 days earlier. So I'm holding those off. But there are some new blooms to look at when we get to the 8th, lurking, hiding. I will, however, show this one. This has got to come down anyway, because it's now in bloom. And the blooms are practically touching the roof at the moment. Now, this is Tolumnia peach. Now, there's nothing to worry about this plant, nothing at all, apart from the fact it's bone dry and needs watering, which I'll be getting at as soon as I finish this video. It's a nice Tolumnia, grows well for me. It's produced a mass of roots, an absolute mass of roots. The mount is covered in it, all round the back as well. So it's a good root system, it grows well, and it's rewarded me with 3 spikes at once. Now, Tolumnia peach is a serious colour changer, because when it opens, we don't have signs of peach, do we? What we have is a lovely bright yellow and a deep red, and that's it. Yeah? By the time we get to everything in bloom on the 8th, where this is now in bloom, so it'll obviously come down again, we may have some peach on it. Yeah? But not yet. So, yeah, plants to worry about. That's not one. But there are some. I have got a couple of Tolumnias. Plants to worry about. Where is the little blighter? It's hiding. I think it's this one. This is one of my Latoria types, and because I lost all the tags, I'm pretty sure this is Rhodostictum, which is one of my all-time favourite Latorias, and it went downhill badly, so I worried about it. Took it out of its pot and mounted it. Well, we now have 2 reasonable new growths, yeah? And since it went on the mount, it started to produce some better roots. So I'm not as worried about it, but I don't want to lose it. Chances are if I lost that, I'd replace it, which means it's going to cost me more money just to get the same plant back again. So the worry was, why are you not doing well? Firstly, we had a heat wave, yeah? And at that particular time, both last year and the year before, my shade netting was a bit light. Hence the light levels in here increased dramatically, day in, day out, day after day of lovely blue sky, lovely sunshine, you know, but for the plants it was too much. So that got at it. Took a while for me to realise, and I didn't realise it with these, I realised it with some of my Oncidium types, and I was told off by a good Oncidium grower and said, your plant's getting too much like Roger, their leaves are pale. So when things change gradually, it's often difficult to see the changes. But having got stopped dead, I went and had a look and I thought, oh crikey, they are. We've got an awful lot of Oncidium types getting pretty pale, heading towards the yellowing. So I did something about it. Too late for these, many dropped their leaves, yeah, which was a shame. In addition to that, where Latorias come from, they would grow continuously. They would have a main growing season, the rainy season, as they have 2 seasons, a wet one and a drier one. But it's not dry, it's just drier, you know. But nonetheless, I classed it as a continuous grower, so I potted it as such. But what I didn't realise was, because the temperatures were dropping down so much, they were stopping their growth during my winter. It was too cold for them, they didn't like it. Consequently, their pots were staying wet too long because they weren't growing and using up the moisture in the pot. So the roots rotted. I know now, and we won't be doing it again. So that was a plant that I did worry about because I couldn't initially work out why it was going downhill, but some thought, some looking at where it would grow, looking at temperature ranges, I thought, it's not in an ideal world growing for me because it gets too cold in winter. So I need to change something, and what I changed was sticking them on mounts in the main. I think I've only got 1 left in a pot. But I lost some as a consequence of that. It was no good worrying about them once they're gone. It's too late then. Much too late. Other things to worry about for different reasons. This is a worry. And this little Oncidium is a worry because it took one hell of an effort to get, and as a consequence of how I bought it, it cost me quite a lot, but I really wanted it. So I was prepared to do that. But ever since I got it, we've gone from pseudo bulbs of that size down to pseudo bulbs of that size. It's progressively getting worse. And in addition to that, I don't know whether you'll be able to see it, but it just started a new growth about a month ago and it's aborted. There's something wrong with this, it's going downhill. Yeah, so this is now a worry because I won't be able to replace it, or highly unlikely. It's actually changed its name, but when I got it, it was Oncidium varicosum rogersii, variety Balding. So it had my name in it. That's not why I got it, it's the blooms which I'll pop up. But what we've got on here is not a good root system, but we do have some. It's not a rootless plant, but what it is doing is climbing away from the pot. So new roots, when I get some, if I get another new growth, which hopefully it's not going to die, it is going to produce a new growth, are going to be quite a long way from the media and virtually on the edge of the pot. So I need to do something with this and stop worrying about it and get on with it. It's not a good time of year to deal with it now. It may just have to wait. And I'll just keep it on the drier side. It's not growing at the moment. It's not doing anything, so it can be kept on the drier side. Just given a trickle now and again, shall we say. So a lot of the roots went down and came out the bottom of the pot and then promptly failed. Yeah. So these roots down here are dead. They're of no use. But there are some live ones in the pot. Hopefully enough to sustain it until I do something about it. Now when you get an Oncidium type that refuses to stay in the pot and keeps trying to climb out, I have found, not just me, it's mainly Insa. It's his fault. So I said if it moves he mounts it. But I have found that some Oncidium types just seem to grow better mounted. Now that's obviously quite a small one because it's a twinkle. But since that came out of its pot and went on a mount, it's grown better. It wasn't growing bad in the pot, but I thought I'd try it on a mount and it's grown better. And I mean it's produced a hell of a root system. I don't know whether the camera's going to pick that, but down in that hole down there, and the reason there's a hole there was a dead pseudo bulb that was turning brown and felt a little bit as though it was going to go mushy, so I took it off. That left a hole. But it's grown better since it was mounted, which means now if I get an Oncidium that climbs and doesn't want to stay in its pot, it'll go on a mount, knowing that it's probably going to do better. Now back to this one. This has a linear path at the moment. It's heading off in one direction. It's only ever produced one new growth at a time. Never managed to get two leads on it. So if it's going to grow in a single direction, that can get mounted like that, pointing away from the mount. And then if the next new growth is a little away from the mount, I can just put a strap round the rhizome and pull it back down so that the roots get straight into the moss and onto the mount. If I potted it that way on the mount, pointing sideways, well eventually it's going to go off the edge for a start, and it will be better if it just gets to point upwards and grow up the mount. So I would mount that right down near the bottom of the mount. I'm not going to take any pseudo bulbs off. There's not a lot of strength in this plant at the moment. It needs every little bit of help it's going to get. But that's going to go on a mount to see if it grows better. It's always been in a pot since I got it. So a plant to worry about, but not just worry, do something. Just talk about it, boy. Get on and do something. There's another one lurking. I don't know whether I can get at it. And this is a plant that doesn't do that well for me, but I don't worry about it. I'll go over why. Ugh, he says, talking off camera, which is naughty. This is my little variegated Neophonetia. And it doesn't grow that well for me, but since I tried it like this on a mound of moss, will it lift out? Probably. It's not really doing anything. I just want to show you what's inside. What's inside is a hollow little basket with nothing in. And that was surrounded by moss. Yeah? Then the plant was put on top of that moss with its roots spread down over the mound, and then some more moss wrapped around the roots. Well, most of the new roots have come out over the top of that mound. So they've gone aerial, but nonetheless they're in contact with the moss. That moss at the moment is bone dry. I could make it crunch if I squeezed it. And that's because these like to be drier in winter. Quite drier in winter. It's virtually a rest. And then we'll see what it does next year. It did bloom last year for the first time in quite a long time, but I've had serious trouble with scale on this, and I think I've got them now. I can still see some, but I think they're dead ones because they're almost impossible to get off because they're right down in the leaf creases. So, you know, like a little cotton wool bud with some alcohol to wipe them off so that you don't kill them 3 or 4 times is almost impossible to do. So I hope that they're all dead. But it's growing better than it did, and at the time it was going downhill quite fast. It was a little worry, but it's not a plant I enjoy that much. So there is no worry about it now. It'll either grow okay like that or it won't. I'm not worried about it. If it dies, it's not a big deal for me. I've only got the one, and it's nowhere near any of my favourite type of orchid. Some people love them and have whole collections of them. I've got one, and if it does do okay, like that, then it gets to live and stay and hopefully bloom again. But I don't worry about it because it has no specialness to it. Blooms are tiny, they're night fragrant. I don't come out here at night much, so the blooms are almost wasted on me. And they're small. They're attractive, but they're small, and they're white on this one. You can get some varieties with a bit of colour, but they're never what you would call a brightly coloured orchid. So I don't do any worrying about that one. It'll either make it or it won't. And I'm not changing anything. That's how it's going to be grown, because it's done better like that than any other way. So, as I say, things to worry about. What else am I not going to worry about that I should? This one. And this will be a damn nuisance if I lose this, but there's not much I can do about it. This is it's a hybrid between, I think, Sulawensii and Cuthbertsonii. It's a cloud forest dweller. Well, it's never going to do that well in here, is it? And I can't keep the humidity up enough. This should be constantly wet, and it isn't. Yeah, because it gets watered with my other mounts. Now, I am worried about it because I would like to keep it. And the only thing I can do about it to change anything is to water it separately. So this one really needs watering every single day. Well, that's a change in my routine. I don't water my mounts this time of year every single day. So I'd have to change something. And that's the only thing I can change. I can't increase the humidity anymore in here. So all I can do is keep it wet and hope it pulls up. It's dropped quite a lot of leaves recently, and it's still dropping them. But it does have new growths, quite a few new growths coming up around the base, and there are quite a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 new growths. Well, if I change something, those new growths might do much better and grow well and stay green and not dump their leaves. But I've got to change something or it's just going to go. It will eventually go downhill far enough that it won't survive. So, a little worry. It's not one of my favourite orchids as dendrobiums go, because it's just different and awkward. It doesn't fall into the pattern like the rest do. But I'd still like to keep it going, so I'll change something, and that means just me doing something different. Doesn't need unmounting or anything like that, it just needs watering a lot more often, like daily. So I'll have to get at that then. I'll have to just remember to pop out each day, and there's 2 of those, there's another one, tiny one. 2 of those that need that treatment, so we'll deal with those. There's another one up here. Now this wasn't a bad plant once. This is an infundibulum cross, and a while ago it started a lovely strong new growth, and it's aborted it. And on this one, I don't know why. There's no point in worrying about it, really. It might do better on a mount than in a pot, but it's always been in a pot, and I mean it's got a good root system. It's not like it's lacking in roots. And this is a drier in winter. So, you know, it's difficult to know what to do with that. You know, if I worry about it, the consequences are I need to change something, and I don't know what to change. Oh, some scale on that one as well. We'll deal with that now while I see them, before I put it back. They're in there, in that leaf joint. It's an odd one or two in other places. But on dendrobiums, they tend to congregate round the blinking base, so that's just hydrogen peroxide. May or may not kill them, but certainly not going to do them any good. But yeah, this one's not doing as well as it has been. Now it is eventually deciduous. It could just be that most of the canes on here are older. I can't even remember which is the latest cane. I think it may be this one. Possibly this one is one of those two, maybe both. But it has gorgeous blooms that last ages. So for that reason, I'll do a little bit of worrying. I can't do much because I don't know what else to do with it. But nonetheless, latest new growth aborted, a trifle worrying. Could be it's a bit too cool in the winter, couldn't cope. We'll see what the next new growth does, because it's not dying. You know, with a root system like that, I don't think it's dying, it's just not happy. It's trying to find out why it's not happy, and at the moment, quite honestly, I don't have a clue, because in the past it's done okay. Right, other things to worry about. Hibiki is a worry, because I don't want to lose the plant, because I love the blooms and they last absolutely ages. Now this one, it was deemed has got a fungus on it, and it does that. This is a relatively new growth. Well, it shouldn't be dumping leaves that have turned like that. So it's a worry. What have I done with it? I've sprayed it with a fungicide, and it's now due for a second spray, and this time it's going to get a different fungicide. But this plant is going downhill badly. It's got a new growth here, which the latest leaf doesn't look bad, but the oldest leaves are affected. This new growth here, again, it's showing signs of being affected. The oldest part of the plant seems to be hanging in there. It's the newer ones. And what I've got now is a single reasonable new growth with clean leaves. Yeah? So I'm now hoping that this will be the new growth that progresses and doesn't get the marks on it. And that the other canes that are still actually growing and producing new leaves, the new leaves on those are okay. I can't save the old leaves that have got the marks on them. There's no hope for them. But if you look at, oh God, this is difficult to handle, there's also a cane in the way. If you look at this little new growth round here, all the leaves are marked. So I don't think that's going to grow anymore. I think that's just ceased to be. That cane will now not extend. And it's probably too small to ever have blooms on it. This new growth round here has rotted. That's gone. This new growth here is a kiki. It's come out from way up the cane, and it's not happy. So, a worry. Most of the other people I know that have got that have got it growing in a pot. I was the daft one who mounted it. Maybe that's its problem. Maybe because it's mounted, it dries in between. Yeah, and perhaps it shouldn't do. But I don't think the parents come from cloud forest environments, which are the ones that are the difficult ones, that should never dry out. What else have we got that's a little bit of a worry? And what? Well, obviously why? Oh, here's an example of worry that is undue. That ugly little beastie is a zygopetalum, and it's not happy. It's not growing well. In fact, it's not growing at all at the moment. But I do have a few roots in the pot, not many. and I would suggest that that pot is too big. Now, for some strange reason, I got it in my head that quite a few zygos are what's classed as semi-terrestrial, so they grow on the ground but not in it, on it, so in the leaf litter and places like that. Well, I've since found out that there are an awful lot more that are true epiphytes, and they do grow up in the trees, but they come from damp places, not cloud forests as such, so they're not cold, but they do come from places that are constantly damp. So obviously this shouldn't dry out for any length of time. But it's not growing, and am I worried? No. I've lost a lot of zygopetalum, so I'm expecting to lose this one. So I'm not going to do anything about it. It'll either make it or it won't, but I'm not worrying about it. Because I can see no point. You see what I mean? They're as common as muck, for a start. If I want another zygo, I'll just go and get another one. So losing one to me, this one would not be a problem. It wasn't a gift, there was nothing special about it. I mean, I love the blooms and I love the fragrance, but not enough to struggle with a plant. I mean, it's borderline just going in the bin, that one. I'll get the other one out because I've also stopped worrying about this one, but then this one doesn't need quite so much worrying. It's lost all its old leaves, so all the old pseudobulbs are totally leafless now, and it's got one new growth, which may or may not have some roots. I've forgotten, I haven't looked recently. Yeah, it's got some root growth, so there are some active roots down in the pot. I wouldn't class that as many though. And it has a new growth that's probably not going to get much bigger than that. That's about it. So if that plant is going to make it, it will put up another new growth that will be bigger and stronger. Or it won't. And if it doesn't, it's not going to make it. I'm not going to worry about it. It either will or it won't. I'm not changing anything, nothing. It'll either make it or it won't. And that's how I am with some plants. This big thing never gets filmed. This is a giant of a bulbophyllum, and this is Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. It's actually several pieces in a large bowl. And I don't do any worrying about this. It pushes up new growths, does its own thing. So far it's managed to stay in the bowl and not climb out. It stays quite wet in here because of the bowl. It holds an awful lot of moisture, this clay bowl. But if it gets left to dry, the bowl itself will suck all the moisture and nutrients out of the media and leave it bone dry. So I can't let it get too dry, but I do let it dry off a bit. But this should bloom soon, and I'm not worried whether it blooms or not. It's not in my way. It lives in a place where, you know, it gets watered now and again when I remember. Seems to be okay. The leaves look healthy enough. New growths every now and again. Well, actually quite frequently on this one. It just does its own thing. If it doesn't bloom, I'm not that fussed. If it does, great. Blooms don't last long. They are attractive. They don't last long. I don't think they're fragrant. And if they are, I've never found any fragrance on them. But it's a reasonably strong, healthy plant. So it just lives. It just sits there and does its own thing. But it doesn't involve any type of worry. And if it doesn't bloom, even that's not a worry. Not for me, anyway. I just don't. Aha! What else? Not much else really. Ah, yes. This one is a worry because, first of all, it's a relatively new plant. It's pretty flipping special. There was a job lot of these came onto the market in the EU, and it's an unusual cross. It's a Laelia cross with a Broughtonia, I think it is, from memory. And I decided to mount it, and since I mounted it, it's done absolutely nothing. I can just now see some signs of some new root growth. But somebody else I know bought a couple of these because they really like the blooms as well, and theirs grew lots of new roots quite quickly. Possibly in a pot, not on a mount. So I wonder. But this got quite a dramatic change coming out of the pot it was in to go on the mount, so I would have expected it to stall, especially as it had just used up most of its energy producing the bloom spikes. But it has got new growths. There's two new growths on it. One here, tiny little one, and another one here. But it's not growing. Although it has two new growths, they don't seem to be getting any bigger. It's as though the whole plant has stalled. But the pseudobulbs haven't shriveled. So it's not going down. It's just stalled. It's just sitting there. And it may well be that the combination of the two plants are warmer growers, and it doesn't like my winter. So it's not going to get going till spring when the temperatures come up a bit. I know it's a high light orchid, but well, higher light than some Cattleya types. So we'll have to wait and see. So it's a bit of a worry, but there's not much I can do about it. You know, if I take it off the mount and put it back in a pot, it's another major change, and that's probably going to lose the few roots I have got. So it needs to stay where it is for a while at least. If you keep chopping and changing, every change is a stress level. And if it hasn't got over the previous stress level, you know, you've tried it in bark, then you've unpotted it and put it in moss, and then you've tried it on a mount, and then you've tried it in leca, and you're just stressing it out, you know. Even though one of those efforts might be just the one that gets it going again. But if it's the third type of stress you've given it, it might not have the strength. So yeah, a little bit of a worry, but not a lot. And what else have I got? There isn't much else that I'm worried about actually. What I call a precious plant, precious to me. This little thing, which I've forgotten what it is, was a present from Lynn. Oh, and by the way, thanks for those of you who went over to Lynn's channel and subscribed. Yeah. She's got off to a good start, hasn't she? Over 100 subscribers in a few days. It took me over a month to get my first 100. But whatever this little thing is that was a gift from Lynn, it's got a little spike on it. Now, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. The impression I get is that it's a Latoria type or from that arena. But it's got a little spike. Now, whether that opens as a bloom or not, I don't know. But looking at the size of the bud, I've got a feeling it's not going to be of much interest to me. I'm not really into blooms that I've got to get a magnifying glass out to inspect their beauty. I like them to be there, if you know what I mean. So I'm not into the tiny little blooms. Some are. Those of botanical interest, I think they're called. But they don't do much for me. There was another one that I don't want to lose. Right, yes, the two Miltoniopsis species that I'd probably never be able to get again. What are they up to? Now this one has got a strange name because it's Miltoniopsis phalaenopsis. Will make your flipping mind up, mate. But there are only, I think there's only 5 Miltoniopsis species left in the wild, maybe down to 4 now. They're going down fast. The hybrids are common, Miltoniopsis hybrids, but getting hold of the species is not easy. Now this one is going to make it. It's growing. I don't care if it is only one, it's growing roots. It hasn't dropped all its leaves, it's going to make it. Yeah? And then one day down the line, we should start to see some new growths, and then maybe we'll get a bloom. But a Miltoniopsis species that is just about hanging on, and I believe it's going to make it. As long as I don't roast it in the summer and keep the humidity up. However, the other one, which I will never ever be able to replace, is borderline whether it's going to make it or not. It's dropped most of its leaves. It now has one single green pseudobulb with one single leaf. And this is Miltoniopsis, oh God, what's it called? Roselii, and it's the variety something or other that I'll put in a pop-up. But it is a variety of that particular species that has yellow blooms. I've got a feeling it's the only wild yellow Miltoniopsis, and I'm not sure it's going to make it. I will be sad if I lose it, but although it went downhill badly, I had a couple of rotten pseudobulbs I had to take off, no roots. That pseudobulb is still green and it's held its leaf. It's an incredibly slow grower, highly sensitive to environmental changes, doesn't like being root disturbed, doesn't like being moved, quite honestly, it hates the world. Unless it's happily growing in the wild, which it isn't. It may make it. And yes, I'm worried about it. There's nothing else I can do. It's in the smallest pot I can get it in. It's got a suitable media if and when it decides to push out some roots. I'll be very sorry if I lose it, because I can't get that again. And I would love to see that bloom. 3 years, I would suggest, possibly even 4, to get from there to a strong enough plant to allow it to bloom. Because even if that puts up a new growth now, in this coming growing season, I can't let it bloom. There's no strength there at all. That's about one of the weakest plants in the grow room at the moment. No sign of activity whatsoever, but not actually dead yet. It's damn close. So yes, I would worry if that one went over, but I've done what I can for it. That's all I can say. I've done what I can. And that's all we can do. What else have I got? My cold cup of coffee needs attention. I'm worried about that. I'm also worried about that I mucked up the shopping because I didn't realise I was low on Demerara sugar, which is how I like my coffee. And I've run out. And I went up, well, there's one little supermarket that way that I know doesn't sell Demerara sugar. The one up there does, but they'd run out. That's all those people buying up all the brown sugars to do all their flipping Christmas baking. But they'd run out, so I've now run out. And that's a rare event for me, because normally as soon as something starts getting used up, I get what I call a backup pack, so that I never run out. And I've run out of that, so I'm using that horrible white refined sugar now. Still, got to be done. Here's another plant I'm worried about to a degree. Ugh. That's so I can get it down without splatting everything all over the grow room. And that's my Sotoanum. Now I messed this up. This is nobody's fault but my own. Let it get dry too often and for too long. And so it didn't dump its roots. I believe it's still got a good root system going on. Yep, plenty of roots. So it's not a root issue. It was just letting that root system get dry when it was in full flood. And now it's almost stopped growing. The older pseudobulbs have shriveled. Some of them, since I started watering it properly, have started to plump up, which that I am surprised about. But there is a bit of plumping going on in some places. Some of them have gone too far, they're not going to plump up. But it's now coming into growth again. Only one new growth. So it's effectively at the moment totally stalled. But then this isn't its growing season. Yeah, it's done its blooming, it's done that, spikes are off, along with quite a few of the older manky leaves, so that it's got less to support while it's not growing. Yeah. So we got to recover this now and get it back to its former glory, which was spectacular and stunning. So it would be silly to lose a plant like that, wouldn't it? Well, I'm not going to lose it. I'm not worried about actually losing it. I'm just worried how long it's going to take to get it back how it was before. And the next time that gets repotted, we've got an awful lot of back end of plant to come off, because this back end of plant now is not really doing much to support the plant. These are just old areas of the plant. The equivalent of it dying off and moving along its branch in the wild. That's how Oncidiums often grow. Sometimes they form a clump and grow out in all directions, and the middle bit dies and they end up like a halo with all the active growth around the outsides. Sometimes they just move, yeah, and all the new growth is up one end and the older parts dying back. But they do move, they won't stay still, they progress as the new growths come out. So a trifle worrying, but not a lot I can do about it at the moment, apart from wait for the new growth and then make sure it doesn't dry out when it's growing this time round. Duh. There's another one. There's a cattleya I'm worried about. I can't get at it. It's too buried. I can't get at it. Yeah, I think that'll do. But it's just a matter of thinking, is it worth worrying about an orchid? What is its true value? You know, you've got 100 orchids, 20 of which are phalaenopsis perhaps, and one of them's not doing so well. My simple answer is just let it go. Stick with the ones that are doing well. Unless there's something blatantly obvious that you can remedy. But that's what worry is about, is pushing your thoughts towards remedies, changes. And if you go down those paths and you've got nothing, then just let it go. That's my easy answer. Now back to my rationalisation. Yeah, I've dumped quite a lot of plants that are just in a sorry state and are not going to recover. They're gone. I've got some better plants that are going to other people. That's still maybe not enough to get it down where I'd be most comfortable. So if I've got half a dozen or so plants in here that are dying, let them go. They're special. Let them go. That's my attitude. Not everybody's that way inclined. Some people are born rescuers. They actually actively go out and buy plants that are in a real bad way so they can rescue them. And there is a satisfaction in doing that. I've left that behind a long time ago. I don't do rescue plants. I haven't got the time or the patience. So I try and buy what starts out as reasonable plants and then try and keep them that way. I find that more satisfying, but each to their own. Anyway, that's enough waffle. I do have watering to do, and I'll get this one posted. And as I say, let's look forward to 2020 being a growing season without a heat wave, preferably. Just intermittent, some nice weather, some rain now and again, so I don't have to water the garden every day. Because that was taking up time last year, you know. There's only so much you can do. But yeah, let's hope we get a nice growing season this year with a variety of weathers, some good temperatures without being roasted, and no really long dull patches where we get the dull rainy days in the middle of the growing season because the light levels drop and things can start to slow down. It puts a brake on them. Yeah, so let's all have a good season, and I've got no plans to buy anything this year. Now, as I've said, as I've been reminded, I said that in 2019 and 2018 and 2017. And I can't look up and say, and this year I mean it, because I know an odd plant will catch my eye. I know it's going to happen, so there's no point in digging my heels in and saying no, because what's the point? You know, the downsizing is for workload mainly, and to gain space for the existing plants to be able to have airflow round them and space, so that they're not all squashed up together and touching each other. So that's what the downsizing is for. But there is room for more plants. In fact, there's room for lots more plants, but I don't want them. So they're going to have to be quite special and catch my eye, so to speak. So I won't deny that a few new orchids may appear, but it's not going to be frequent. So don't look forward to loads and loads of unboxing videos, because there won't be any, or many, if at all. We'll see. See you next time. Bye for now.